young Americans who whether we want to focus on them or not, Sandy, on either side of the aisle, young Americans are unhappy and they're frustrated and they're not looking at our country the way you and I are, and those of us who um, are on the other side of our life cycle who benefited from the America that we knew and many of us loved that provided a way for us. Um, Many of those Generation Xers and millennials aren't very happy with our
Yeah,
nation.
they see a different path, and that's why on Friday, I think we, in response to one of the callers, what we talked about was kind of depends on whose lens you look at these candidates through. If you're a young person looking at the candidates, you have a different set of interests and worries than an older the baby boomers, for instance, and so I think it will be interesting in this discussion to highlight the things that might be responsive to the needs of young. I think I talked about young Tom, Dick, and Mary, and that's who that's an important vantage point, particularly in this election, because exciting the vote of the young is going to be important to both candidates, and the young Tom, Dick, and Mary do have a set of interests that are different than us, than
So,
the baby boomers.
so listen to this paragraph from this article. Young Americans are unhappy, and here's why. Young people under age 30 rank 62nd out of 143 countries for happiness. They said that America would rank, in their belief, 62nd out of 143 countries for happiness. Last week, young Americans made it clear that they are unhappy with their country. In the World Happiness Report, America ranks 62nd out of 134 participating countries and 23rd in overall, a significant drop from previous years. While I'm certain that young Americans have been unhappy for some time, they have finally found their voice and are speaking out. The reasons for their discontent range from excessive use of social media and lockdown due to the pandemic to declining mental health, high living costs, and inadequate health care. The prevalence of gun violence and crippling student debt only add to their frustration as well as the lack of social programs. Sadly, the American dream is no longer attainable for many young people who struggle to afford necessities like housing. Uh, Calvin is a young guy starting out his life, Sandy. And Calvin, you're one of those guys. Your thoughts on young people and their thoughts about and your contemporaries, their thought about the country.
Yeah, I mean, we don't talk politics too much as far as that direction, but in terms of the cost of housing and that kind of thing, I know a lot of my friends still live with their parents, and the cost is one of the biggest reasons why that's still the case.
Not only the fact of the cost, uh, uh, Calvin, but also the fact that the what you guys make is not commensurate with what my generation made at young ages. And so the cost of living, Sandy, being as high as it is, the fact that what young people are being paid is inadequate to deal with today's cost in the society. One
Well,
of the big issues.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons why people focus on housing and the rest of it is that the disposable income available for housing is being squeezed by some of these other things that we talk about, by healthcare costs, by child daycare costs, and there's no question that housing has gone up, but housing as a percentage of disposable income is probably not out of line.
844-967-2789 is the number. It's Tuesdays with Sandy Williams and you on the Earl Ingram Show. Boom, 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 boom. All right, welcome back. to Tuesday edition of the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. And before we went to break, we were talking, Sandy, about the young Americans and really, Sandy, they're going to be very instrumental in the outcome of this election, and it would make sense that that both Democrats and Republicans understand that they need to do something and take heed to what young Americans are saying. Let me do this before we go to the phone lines.
Well, and in fact, I think in a future show, after we get done with these two we're talking about, we ought to have a show that just focuses on
that.
young Americans. What is it? How are they doing? What are they thinking about? What's their plight? What's their desire? I think that's an important focus because I don't think unfortunately, politicians have been very focused on the generation in which they reside, and the United States has been under the control of the baby boom generation for a long time.
Yeah, and yeah. So let me do this. In 2018, I was 38 years old and had a successful career in Washington, D.C. at the Department of Defense. However, deep down, I was unhappy. Despite living in a wealthy neighborhood in Bethesda, I felt empty inside. That's when I decided to leave America and move to Spain, where I now live, off of the grid in a vibrant village just 30 minutes away from breathtaking city of Grenada, recognized by the UNESCO as one of the most beautiful cities in the world. This change turned my life around. I couldn't be happier. The slow pace of life, strong sense of community, absence of traditional career, and focus on nature and good food all contribute to my contentment. Let's go to Bill from Oconomowoc. Good morning to you, Bill. How you doing? Are you aware of the fact that young people in this nation don't see the nation the way we did, and if they could, would change the way the nation is run?
Yes, I do, because unfortunately I'm blessed and I've got a bunch of grandkids, and they're all teenagers except one, and they face housing and just talking about that. But Biden is Biden is a humanitarian. And my grandkids, all of them, are humanitarians. They want to see society get better for them and those around them. And I like Sandy's idea about Young America show. I think that you knocked it out of the park there, Sandy, with that Young America show. But what I'm wondering is, and I'd like to ask, and I could talk to my son because he's one of those guys, what would be wrong with, we have elder housing, we have 55 and older. How about Young America housing? And there's a lot of entrepreneurs that say, oh, I don't want young people coming in and wrecking my building. Just a minute, buddy. Leave the room, because we want people who believe in Young America, not people who don't. I don't need the skeptics. We can turn it around. And as far as Biden goes, I'll just tell you what he's meant for me. My retirement's up 40%, man, 40% since Biden's been in. We have more money now than we've ever had in our life. They talk about inflation. The guys who talk about
Bill, I need to just hold the thought, and then I'll let you come back. Again, some of us are thriving in this economy. Many younger people aren't. And Bill, that's the dilemma that that young people are faced with. Why are so many people thriving in the economy and we're struggling?
But now, I think Bill has shifted gears. He wants to talk about, and he's going to list the things that, as far as he's concerned, Biden has accomplished. And I suspect we can get apples and oranges here. We ought to talk about the good things, and then we ought to talk about what it is that needs to be accomplished for the young folks.
Go ahead, Bill.
Well, thank you, guys. Let's go back to the young, because they're more important to me. I don't need to worry about me or talk about me. I don't want to. How about the young people? If we had Young American housing, if we had going back to making colleges affordable for kids, not their parents, their kids. When you and I were kids, or the three of us were kids, we on our own could handle it just about. Yeah, it'd be nice if
Well,
mom
we
and
well
dad
we
kicked
but
in some,
well you
but
you
we could. Go ahead.
you've raised two issues there that I think Biden has tried to deal with. One of them is student loans. We it's hard for the government to make education cheap. The federal government doesn't provide education. It's done at the state level or it's done privately. But he has at least tried to deal with the debt problem that many students have experienced, is one thing. And secondly, with respect to young people and for instance children, I think he has tried to move in the direction of further support for the uh, credit, the child care credit, uh, and uh, and child daycare is obviously an immense burden to the young families today. And so I think those are two issues that the Biden administration has tried to deal with, and the Biden budget that was proposed tries to deal with.
Well, we've got a list of at least 25 accomplishments that President Joe Biden has been at the head of in his soon to be 4 years in office. And we're going to go down that list as we move forward in the program today. So, Bill, you something else you wanted to say?
Well, no, but I really like this embracing the young people and getting, you guys have the ability to do it with a snap of your fingers. Invite young people to call in. Let's hear what's on their mind. Let's hear what they want. But think I can give you a couple things they want. I'll be shocked if this isn't one of them. Humanitarianism. They want our country to be more humanitarian. I really believe it. That's why we have these disputes on college campus and demonstrations. They're thinking about everybody. They don't want to see people hurt, shot, or getting these wars. We have to listen to them. And you guys might be on to what I call a real rocket ship with investing in the young people's ideas.
Hey, Bill, thank you very much for the call. As always, 844-967-2789. We're certainly going to solicit your calls, and we want to make sure that we have this conversation and dialogue open to each and every one of you. But this is a conversation that has to be had as well. And as I stated earlier, Sandy and I are going to touch a lot of different areas in the coming days and weeks as we move forward with this election. 844-967-2789 is the number. You're tuning into the Earl Ingram Show. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams and you. So welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at the same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams. And Sandy, you got the music. Who is that?
John Lee Hooker.
So tell us a little bit about John Lee.
Well, he's a blues guy, and I think he's done more things that you'll remember than not. But he was a solid blues guy, and actually, I had a young fellow that was almost a son of mine who was totally into John Lee Hooker and the blues. He died tragically when he was about 28, and every year there's now a foundation in his name, the Charles Kubley Foundation, and they spend the money working on suicide prevention and depression awareness. And they have a thing called Beyond the Blues. And the reason the event is called Beyond the Blues is because of John Lee Hooker and what Charlie Kubley used to listen to.
All right. Let me do this before we go to the phone lines. Young people, they struggle with loneliness, not having enough money to buy a home, and living in constant fear due to their upbringing. Even someone like myself who seemed to have it all on paper was unhappy. Why? Because I lacked a sense of belonging, purpose, and community. It was just me, myself, and I. Just like those young Americans, the main focus during my time in America was making money. And this seemed to be the path of many Americans to follow, turning ourselves into money-making machines. That is why young Americans aren't happy. I was one of them until I moved out for good. The way of life in America seems to be the problem, which is all about profit, nothing more. This is what this young man had to say. And he left our, the shores of our
Yeah.
nation
Well,
and found happiness
I think young
somewhere
people I
else.
think young people have a number of complaints. There are some young people who have trouble finding the job that they would work at round the clock, and then there are those who have jobs who find out that the work ethic in America has gone off the charts. And there's plenty of jobs in America, particularly white collar jobs, where people are called upon to work all the time.
They don't want
Okay,
that.
and you know, people who are our age and the next generation maybe got used to that process and have become sort of work addicts. And I think the younger generations, number one, watched us do that, and have also determined that life balance is more important. So there's a much stronger movement today towards making sure that there's life balance, and that's part of the problem that young Americans have, either finding the job or having a job and then achieving life
So
balance.
young people don't want that shirt and tie, sit down at the desk kind of job. They want to create their jobs on the internet. They want to create jobs. Calvin, weigh in on it. They create jobs in this new world that that may not afford them financially well enough. Calvin, many young guys and young girls, they're on the internet creating what they believe is going to make them wealthy, but it's not always the case.
Well, let me just jump in though, because my observation is that it's sort of chicken and egg. Many young people are having trouble finding the job that they want that to be offered to them, and so they're creating their own. Right? I mean, it's necessity can
Which
be
is a struggle.
necessity can be the mother of invention.
Right.
And so I think there are plenty of young people who are pursuing their own endeavors as an option to not really finding the job that they would otherwise want. And then there are those who are hell bent on being entrepreneurs and doing it on their own. Both of these things are going to be positives for our economy in the long run. But the life balance thing is something that many people who have achieved midlife have suddenly realized they want to accomplish as well. And I think there is the kind of a life balance revolution going on in the workplace. That might be another subject for a show, because I think that Americans, one of the reasons why Americans don't test well in this happiness quotient in terms of the international surveys they do on happiness, is this problem in America possibly of life balance.
Calvin?
Well, yeah, I definitely agree with what Sandy was saying. For the most part, most of the people, my friends, are work traditional or normal jobs, but I know I'm aware that creating and kind of like gigging, like doing just short term jobs is definitely increasing in popularity. People don't like feeling stuck to things. And I know like my one friend who works a normal job, he has a 4-year degree, but now he's studying to become a realtor because he wants more flexible hours.
So Tony says on the text line, the high barrier to entry for a lot of things like housing, um, high paying jobs is a factor in the unhappiness of my generation, especially because we can see how other countries support their citizens. That's a great statement.
Yeah, well, I mean, it it has to do with this whole safety net thing. You know, the fact is that young couples struggle to pay child daycare. It's an exorbitant cost. In most countries, that's not a cost they face. Education or paying back student loans isn't a cost that's faced in almost any other country. Uh, Healthcare costs are not something that are faced in many other countries, and these are all uh, extreme barriers to at least comfort and prosperity for young couples
Let's
and
go
young
to
people.
Tom from LA. Hey, good morning to you, Tom. You say what?
Good morning. Good morning, Earl. Good morning, Sandy. First off, we the people ultimately are the government, and we must never forget that. Um, it's really interesting because Sandy's brought up the idea. I put an acronym to it, CHTR, which stands for child care, health care, taxes, and rent or mortgage. And I think what every person needs to be doing is asking their representatives, what do you expect people to do when each of those indices are $16,000 each for an average household of two? And how do you expect them to make it? And I think we need to then pressure our representatives to actually focus on CHTR instead of focusing on other things, if those are the things that are the problem. Childcare definitely is an issue. Healthcare. I mean, we're married to our job. We can't get outside of our job because of the fact of healthcare. And most employers don't even want to be in that situation where they have to pay for healthcare. So Medicare for all would be a great idea. Taxes are what we, pay to have a civilized society. And rent or mortgage, again, you're not going to make it on when you're paying $2,000-$3,000 a month for rent. It's just not going to happen. So I think we as the people need to be calling and putting the pressure on our legislature. I know, as an example, in the past 50 years, that the Republicans have not given one policy that has been there for the middle class or working class people. It's all been for the billionaire class. Anyone that denies that, call in and give us an example of something that happened where they helped the middle class. But I think that we really need to stay laser sharp focused on those four indices, and we need to be pushing our politicians that way. I would just like to say, hey, let's give the Dems a chance. Give the Dems the House, give them the Congress, give them the presidency. Unfortunately, we can't give them the Supreme Court right now, but give them the two out of the three branches, and let's see what happens. It might be pretty amazing. You might be pretty shocked that your world and your life and your happiness quotient actually goes up with
Hey, Tom, the Democrats already have two out of the three branches, the Senate and the
Well, but
presidency.
he's talking about the legislative branch.
Legislative.
Having the Senate doesn't work if you don't have the House. We've all found that out. But one thing about those four items, Tom, is that rent would be digestible but for the other three. I'm not sure that housing costs are actually so disproportionate. It's just that the burden of those housing costs has become unbearable because of the other costs that are also faced.
So let's do this. We got another text message from John K. Quite ironic in a sad way that work stress causes so many health concerns for so many, yet employers don't want to pay for health care for employees. Um, Talked about healthcare over and over again. Let's go to Julie from Franklin. Good morning to you, Julie. Thank you very much for the call. Uh, I responded to when you asked us to come up with things that President Biden had done. We're going to do that, and then Friday we're going to talk about the accomplishments of Donald Trump. But you say what?
I know I was going to tell you, I heard you say that, and I'm like, oh, I wonder if that's because I asked them.
That is why.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So don't you think, and I don't know, Calvin, I'd like to hear, Calvin needs to just have a show. Calvin, Young America with Calvin. And I don't think, okay, so I have a lot of things, but I'll try to go quick. I think, let's think about back when we were in our 20s and our parents would sit around the table and talk politics. We were so uninterested. I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of young kids. I still do. I work for NBC Sports, and I work with people from all over the country. And the young people, they're so refreshing. And I don't think I do think there's issues, but I think don't you guys think that it all kind of starts at home? And what I mean by that is, and I have a 34-year-old son, and I babied him like crazy, and I gave him everything he wanted because it was different than what my mom and dad did. My mom and dad were like, no, you can't have that until you do this or that or whatever. And we thought, well, life's too short. I'm going to give him whatever he wants. My sister, my cousins, everybody that is my age that has older kids. I, this is so surprising to me. Probably 75% of them still pay for the 30-something-year-old's phone, auto insurance, and a lot of things. And our parents didn't do that. They taught us to be survivors, and they taught us that you got to go out and work your butt off. If you want something, you have to be able to pay for it. You might not get it tomorrow. You might have to wait 3 months to get it. You're not going to necessarily get a job out of college that pays what you think you should make, and we didn't either. Life is hard, and that's why life is so good, because when you can succeed in life, whatever it is, it doesn't necessarily have to be money is the where you succeed. If you succeed in life, it usually was hard to get there. And we have to teach like our kids to be survivors. And you're not going to live 5 minutes from an office. It's just not going to happen. We never did. We had to commute. We had to have a roommate. If we wanted to get an apartment on our own, we either had 1 or 2 roommates. We didn't have new cars. We shared rides with people. And you know what? It made us better. I don't know. Maybe I don't know. I'm interested to see what Calvin thinks of that.
Well, Julie, let me just comment the one thing. I think there's hard and then there's very hard, okay, in terms of young people. And some people are born on second base, and it's always hard to get home from second base, but you're on second base. Some people are born on first base or even at home plate and have to even make their way to start with. And so the starting point is different for many children, and maybe the starting point is more difficult for some children. So it's hard to project from our own experience because most of us were born on second base.
So Julie, just hang on a second. 844-967-2789 is the number. It's Tuesday. It means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams and you. I can't believe Sandy is. I would have never thought you to be a blues connoisseur.
You always smile. Absolutely.
Right.
Muddy Waters.
Yeah, Muddy Waters.
John Lee Hooker.
Welcome
Good
back
stuff.
to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams. We're talking about, young people today and the fact that they're so unhappy with this nation. They don't see it the same way we saw it, and they have a right not to see it the way we saw it. And it's their world. So, Julie, I wanted to have you hang on a second because I wanted Tony, Tony Z has weighed in on text. Growing up in a global economy has also been a problem because the businesses don't care about the workers or the community. If it's cheaper to move towns or countries, they go. Towns or to other countries, they go. No community investment. And so that is, in fact, Julie, it's not the way it was. And I was telling Sandy, my dad, who raised 13 children, I remember saying to my dad, you were harder on us than you were on my younger siblings, because at 18 years old, you kind of put pressure on us to get out and start your own, homestead. And we did. And I didn't understand why he wasn't as hard on my youngest siblings. And you know what he told me? He said, it was a different time. When you were young at 18, you could go out and do what I did and go to an industry and start your own place. And because there was enough money in industry that was here that at 18 years old, you could go out and make enough money to live on your own. Sandy?
Well, yeah. I think we pointed out the terrain has changed for young people. It used to be you could get a union job in the 70s. One wage earner earned a middle class income, and the middle class was primarily comprised of single wage earning families. In today's world, the middle class is comprised of two wage earners in a family, and the middle class is facing burdens they didn't face back then because employers paid for health care and employers don't pay for health care now. At least they don't pay the full freight for health care. And the same is true for pension arrangements. So now the family of two who's struggling to be in the middle class is also facing bills after they get their check from their salary check for health care and their student loan. Student loans didn't exist. Julie, when you were probably a young person, I suspect you didn't face student loans, and so the terrain has changed.
Julie?
I agree. It has changed, but I also think that the change there's some better changes to it as well. I think the kids now have so many more options and different areas, like you were talking about, creating their own business, online, or and being able to work remotely. I also unfortunately was in the hospital for 2 weeks last year, and I was in the ICU unit, and all the healthcare, the nurses, they were all in their 20s. So refreshing to see, and a lot of them were traveling nurses, and were just living life.
Yeah, but
And
Julie,
working hard.
everybody can't be a nurse, and takes, a lot of commitment, a lot of intellect. And so many young people won't be able to accomplish that. Thank you very much for the call. Really appreciate it. Let's go to Gary from Sussex. Good morning to you, Gary. You say what?
Well, I really enjoy listening to Julie. Julie and I are like sister and brother. But last week, Friday, when I called up and I mentioned it to you guys about, you sit there and you rip on Trump all the time, and why don't you tell us how good Biden is?
We're going to do that.
Julie called up. Yeah, I know that, and I'm glad you did. Because Julie called up right after me and said that, yeah, she agreed with me on this, and I'm glad you're going to follow through. Now, as far as I'm concerned, I think people are lazy nowadays. When I was a kid, and I'm just speaking for myself now, you guys, that I wanted a bike. I wanted a Schwinn bike. And my mom said, you got to go out and earn it. So I got up every morning at 5 o'clock in the morning. I delivered the Sentinel. And I did that until I had enough money to go get my bike. And then I wanted other stuff. So I just continued my job delivering newspapers for years. We don't live in a socialized country. We live in a capitalist country. You want to work hard, you're gonna start out and you're gonna succeed. Now, Sandy said people aren't born on second base. Well, when I was born in the dugout, sitting on a bench waiting to play. That's how far down we were. My mother got divorced when I was 5 years old. She had 4 kids. We had absolutely nothing. She was making 75 cents an hour being a secretary. The only way we survived was not public assistance. My mom would never collect welfare. We stayed with my grandma and grandpa. My brothers and I, we slept up in the attic. It was an uninsulated attic, and it got cold up there. But, like Julie said, you get pride. When you work hard and you accomplish something, you get pride. And this is what the young people need. They don't have pride in that.
Well, when you make statements that the young people don't have pride, that's a pretty tough statement to make. 844-967-2789 is the number. Hang on the phone lines. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host, Sandy Williams. Love to hear your opinion on it. Welcome back to the Earl Ingram Show. As always, you can join us at 844-967-2789. Text us at that same number. That's Sandy Williams music, blues. I never knew, man, you're a blues guy.
Yeah.
Would have never guessed.
Well, if Calvin's the last song, Calvin, you got to play one bourbon, one scotch, and one beer. That's John Lee Hooker's most famous.
Well, it's Tuesday. That means Tuesday with my co-host, Sandy Williams. If you're just joining us, we're talking about, why young people are not very happy with the nation right now. And both Democrats and Republicans are going to pay the price if they don't address the fact that young people
Well, and
aren't you and I, Sandy.
yeah, and I think it's interesting because Gary was speaking from his experience and his vantage point, and that's how
As we always ask people to do.
as people always do.
Right.
And I think what's missing and what's important is that we hear from the young people who speak from their own vantage point and their own experience.
Well, and that's exactly what this is. Here's a young man. These comments that younger people don't work hard or take pride in their work is ridiculous. Government bent policy to favor boomers since they became the largest voting bloc, and they still do. Example, the Higher Education Act of 1965, the GI Bill, etc. Let's go to the phone lines, and let's go to Malik from Racine. Hey, good morning to you, Malik. It's always good to hear from you, man. You say what?
Hey, good morning, Earl. Good morning, Sandy. No, I was just gonna comment, Julie and Gary, one of the things is I grew up in Oak Creek, and we were fortunate in my family to buy a house right before the market crash in Oak Creek. Within the last year, I know that, from my own family experience, we were able to sell our house for almost, 2.5 times from what we originally had purchased it for. So I know, like Julie's generation, they benefited a lot from that. Where unfortunately, a lot of our incomes, even, down the line, like my cousin, he just graduated as a PA. He makes a very strong 6-figure income. But after taxes and paying off a mortgage, he just purchased a house in Franklin. He barely, like, he's looking to, get a second job. And then just kind of going into what Gary was saying with regards to the capitalistic country that we live in. Unfortunately, I don't feel like that's the case. It's actually not the case because a lot of times the government, it does interfere in business. There is, obviously monopoly laws which are beneficial, but then there's also times where the government decides, TikTok needs to sell because we just don't like the person. I know that there's statutes and, every city has different rules and stuff, but like as a restaurant owner, I have to, file with the city and say, hey, these are my hours. And they limit and they, decide on what I can and can't do in my place of business. So unfortunately, it's not a true capitalistic government. And kind of like what the last person was saying is that last generation, they had a lot more impact. And we're seeing a lot of the results in the downside of all their all of their policies and their involvements in foreign policy and such. And that just goes back to, with how much student loans there are and the incomes that are not going up. Inflation is going up. I know even just with meat prices, produce at my restaurant, we see a large, increase in prices, but people's incomes are not matching that. So it's difficult to stay in business. It's difficult to get work. There's a lot of challenges that we face, but I think that's one thing that I do agree with Julie is that, these hard times, we're going to make those decisions and we're going to try to make the best out of the situation. But I think that's part of what needs to happen is kind of like taking a step back from the older generation and just allowing the newer generation to take new positions and have a little bit more of a voice and such.
Hey, Malik, very well said, man. Hey, reach out to me. I know it's been a while, man. Reach out to me again. Thank you very much for the call. Let's go to David from Mequon. Good morning to you, David. You say what?
Good morning, gentlemen. Really quickly, I would say this. One thing that's kind of overlooked, I think I've mentioned to you guys before, my father is in hospice, and Medicare does not pay for long-term care, does not pay for hearing aids, does nothing for eyesight, does nothing for dental. So the problem is when you get to be a certain age, obviously there's a lot of things that can go wrong with you. But when you get into an assisted living facility, there's absolutely the only way you get help is until you go broke. And when I say that, Medicare does not pay for a single dime of that whatsoever. And unfortunately, what I think people don't realize is, yes, it costs a lot of money to live nowadays for a variety of reasons. Part of it is technology. You look at cars today, the reason why they're much higher price, look at all the electronics in it. Look at all the safety features, obviously, that have been added since, the last 40, 50 years. It's not cheap. And unfortunately, with technology, and you see what happened in California with the minimum wage. What do the large companies do? They immediately laid off tens of thousands of people. They're being replaced with kiosks and AI, artificial intelligence.
Well, no,
and
David, that's
going
been
quickly.
David, that's been predicted. That hasn't happened yet. They haven't laid off tens of thousands yet. There's just a prediction that some of these are going to move in the direction of kiosks and self-service.
So, Sandy, I guess what I would say to you is this. So when it went from $16 to $20, that expedited the process of going to artificial intelligence and automation much more quickly. So now the people that were supposed to benefit are not benefiting because they're out of a job.
Well,
They don't even have a chance to get on the ladder.
Yeah, I don't think we want to get into a debate, but the problem with minimum wage is that if you extrapolate, if a $16 wage is something that's being earned by a college student while they're going to school, that's one thing. If a $16 wage is being earned by one of two wage earners in a family, and the family is trying to make it by having two minimum wage earners, which is a pretty common phenomena in the world today, then what we end up seeing is that people are getting paid unlivable wages, and it's really putting everybody behind the eight ball, and that's one of the things that's happened in our economy. Like I've said, it used to be one wage earner could get you to the middle class. Today it takes two, and one of the problems is that the wage structure has declined in America for the single wage earner. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things, Dave, you're talking about is the insufficiency of Medicare with respect to what it can provide, and I think what you're tacitly saying is that there does need to be government programs for the elderly, and that the elderly are in a bad spot, particularly when they get very sick and at near end of life, and there is a place for government in this process.
So it can't be both ways. Okay. You can't say, you know, that the government can't afford and then turn around and say they're not providing. Let's go to Mike from Kenosha. Good morning to you, Mike. Thank you very much for the call. Your thoughts.
Thanks for taking my call. What a great morning of phone calls from all your listeners. I loved every word that Gary and Julie and the other callers, Malik, David. That's what we need is participation. We can figure all this stuff out. But to get to my point, our young people are very, very smart. They're very aware. And quite frankly, if I were a younger person, if I had to witness the Iraq war and the Afghanistan war, and all of these, my classmates in my era, my generation of young people being shipped off to war, when it was pretty much and has been pretty much proven that the Middle East conflict was very synonymous with Vietnam as far as we didn't have to do this. We didn't have to be there. But no, what did we do throughout the W administration, throughout the Obama administration, and then into the Trump administration? We're still in war. No matter if your brothers and sisters or classmates, if they've had to serve 3 or 4, 5 tours, no, the public did not come to their defense. So if you're a young person watching the illegal wars of the Middle East and your classmates being fodder for the whole political broken system that we're in, how much faith would you have? At the same time, then we're denying climate change. They've been taught in saying that the end was inevitable. We have Armageddon coming. Mother Nature is just going to puke all over all of us. And what did we do? Nothing. So what you're seeing, in my mind, is frustration from a young group of people that have been asked for so much and ridiculed so much to where they're spinning around in circles. They don't know who to trust and who to believe. So, the first step, I think, is having great conversations with Julie and Gary and Malik and David and everybody else in you and I, we the people, as we are reminded, we are the government. We're supposed to take control of this thing, and we're supposed to have the backs of our young people, and especially when they're going to war. But we didn't. So, that's what you get when you do things half-assed.
Hey, Mike. Thank you very much for the call. Sandy, you want to respond?
Well, I think I think this dialogue is something that's really interesting to pursue, and I think we all try to project what young people are thinking, and then the young people have their own thoughts. But I think it's important that we all do try to project, and we all do try to put ourselves into the shoes of the next generations, and that we start looking at our policies and our politicians and who we elect through the eyes of young people. And we can worry about fiscal austerity and the national debt, but we also have to worry about the policies and the expenses that are borne by young Tom, Dick, and Mary. And today we were hoping to get to talk about Biden and the reasons for voting for Biden, and to try and analyze that and get call-ins about it. We might not be able to finish that process today.
Yeah, because we've got a guest coming in. But Sandy, I will say this: the young people and Mike from Kenosha hit it on the head. They're not worried that China's coming after us. They're not worried that Russia's coming after us. That's our generation that keeps fearing that the boogeyman is
Well,
coming.
we talked about it last week or the week before, but the duck and cover generation of the baby boomers developed a whole psychosis about being invaded and the dangers of the world that maybe the young people don't share.
844-967-2789 is the number. You're tuned into the Earl Ingram Show. It's Tuesday. That means Tuesdays with my co-host Sandy Williams.